War looms in the Middle East. America faces more danger than ever before. But is the real enemy hidden from sight? Join us for the conclusion of a special series on Jewish Voice. 2012. Is this the end?
Shalom and welcome to Jewish Voice. I'm Jonathan Bernis, and I am so glad that you joined us today because we're concluding a very important series of programs. In fact, if you missed any of the preceding programs, you need to visit our website so you can watch each and every one of them at your convenience. Well, political unrest, economic upheavals, natural disasters, terrorist plots and rumors of war, it all sounds like a plot in a disaster movie, doesn't it? Well, in reality, this is what we're experiencing as we look around us today. For 3 past weeks, we've been looking at the disturbing signs of the last days and asking the troubling question, is 2012 the end? Well, to help us answer this question, I've asked a dear friend to join me. He's a former Muslim terrorist, an expert on the growth of radical Islam and their agenda and what may lie ahead. Please welcome back to Jewish Voice, my dear friend, Walid Shoebat. Hey! Hello, my friend. Great to have you back. Great to have you. Most people watching do know you. We've had you on the program many times. I see you all over. But I'm not sure that everybody knows you, and you have an amazing story. Just briefly, you went from Islamic terrorist to born-again believer who loves Israel and the Jewish people. That's pretty amazing.
Well, my mother was American, Christian. My father was Muslim, lived in the Middle East. I was born in Bethlehem, a little village that you guys sing about once a year and forget about us for the rest of the year. And I grew up in Bethlehem and in Israel. So I breathed the air of Israel. And I, was raised to hate the Jews, hate America, and whoever says that's not true, that's exactly what they teach in those schools. And so growing up in the schools in the Middle East, it really creates a terrorist. The Palestinian areas is probably the hub of all, top-notch terrorism in the entire world. I have first cousins who were terrorists. I have mastermind of a suicide bombing operation. I got another cousin who was shot in his way to Ben Yehuda Street to plant a bomb. Of course, I did my first operation when I was 16 years old. I planted a bomb, and it exploded. No one was hurt. And so 1993, my life took a turn. I wanted to convert my wife, Maria, to Islam. It's a duty of every Muslim male to convert his non-Muslim wife to Islam. In that process, my wife gave me some challenges. She said, do you always claim things about a book you never really read or studied? That means the Bible. Because I made claims about the Bible, so you never really studied the Bible. So I said, for a woman, you're pretty smart. And I bought a Bible, began to read it, and right there from Genesis, really what I found out, that what's the antithesis of what's in the Bible was Islam, In other words, the spirit of Antichrist, if you look at the Bible, denies the Father and the Son. So as a Muslim, we denied the Trinity. We denied the crucifixion. Everything that is holy and precious in the Bible was made unholy in the Quran and in Islam. And so I began to see, how could God manufacture many religions? It can't be possible. So that whole study ended up with me finding out that, God have ordained and spoken the truth from the beginning, as in Isaiah. For I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me, foretelling the end from the beginning. It's not just 8,000 verses in prophetic verses in the Bible. The whole Bible was prophetic. So seeing everything from the names, Bethlehem, where he was born, everything was prophetic, all the way to Revelations, was talking about really the struggle between good and evil, between God and Lucifer. And the whole thing is so complex, but it just took me a year. I couldn't put the book down. And I ended up becoming a believer. After an argument with my wife, Maria, I really learned in America, the guy hits the couch. I was sitting down 3 o'clock in the morning in the couch.
She won.
She won. And I said, I said, it's either she's right and I'm wrong. How could she be right and I'm wrong? She's a woman. I'm a man. I had to end up confessing that I was wrong. And she told me a month later, you're not the husband that I've known. I said, do you want the old husband? She says, no, I like the new one a lot better.
Praise God.
Thank you very much.
Israel's facing the greatest crisis since 1973. And I want to talk about the real story behind the Arab Spring, what they're calling the Arab Spring. So there's a lot ahead. You don't want to miss it. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Enemies gather, plans are made, and terror rains down on the innocent. The force that shocked the nation a decade ago is gathering momentum once again. In his detailed book, God's War on Terror, Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible, former PLO terrorist Walid Shoebat reveals the critical links between Islam and the Bible's prophetic timeline for the last days. With it, you'll unlock mysteries in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, and discover how the Islamic end times mindset perfectly matches the spirit of Antichrist. What is the mark of the beast? Why the Antichrist will come from the east, not from the west? And which Muslim nation will lead a coalition to follow the Antichrist? In appreciation for your gift of $50 or more, we want to send you a copy of God's War on Terror. Your gift will ensure that urgently needed medical care will reach hurting Jewish people in some of the most remote and forgotten places on earth, and they will hear the truth of Yeshua, the Messiah. Call now, and we'll include a copy of A Rabbi Looks at the Last Days. Much of what you've heard about the return of the Messiah may not be the whole story. In this stirring book, Jonathan Bernis brings a fresh view and extraordinary insight to this riveting and timely subject. With it, you'll better understand these troubling times and discover the startling link between Israel, the Jewish people, and the return of the Messiah. Call or click right now with your gift of $50 or more to receive your copies of God's War on Terror and A Rabbi Looks at the Last Days. Your generosity will ensure that urgently needed medical care and the truth of Yeshua will free these Jewish people imprisoned by sickness and spiritual oppression. Don't wait. Call or click now. And thank you for your faithful support.
Welcome back to Jewish Voice. I'm Jonathan Bernis, and if you've just joined us, I'm talking with a former terrorist and member of the PLO, Walid Shoebat. Walid, let me go back and ask you this, because I mentioned it before the break. The Arab Spring, what they're calling the Arab Spring, Mubarak being overthrown, a success for those that desire true democracy in the world. That's not really the case, is it?
Absolutely not. We've seen Egypt. Egypt is gone. Libya is gone. Tunisia is gone. I mean, I know of Tunisia's Al-Nahda movement from the years I was in Chicago. I mean, there was Rashad al-Ghanouchi. He was a Muslim Brotherhood. Everybody knows that. Egypt. We've seen Egypt. I mean, they were not showing on the news what really was going on in Egypt.
Tell us what really was going on, how this all was orchestrated.
I mean, you had a secular so-called movement. And then on Friday prayer, the Muslim Brotherhood began their movement. And it was during that Friday after the prayer when you had the real revolution.
We're talking about a radical Islamic group that was banned from Egypt in 1922 and was responsible for assassinating Sadat because of his plans for peace treaty with Israel.
It's banned all over the Middle East. It was banned all over, except America. It's not banned. It's banned throughout the Middle East. In fact, Sheikh Qaradawi, the spear leader of the spirit, you know, the head and the brain of the Muslim Brotherhood is really Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi. He took the stage on Victory Day in Tahrir Square. And how many Americans watched what happened in Egypt? Nobody. Nobody showed 2 million Egyptians in Tahrir Square crying out, Al-Quds Raihin Shuhada bil Malayin. English, to Jerusalem we march, martyrs by the millions. To Jerusalem we march, That's from the Bible, by the way. Zechariah. Jerusalem will be what? A trembling cup to all who surrounding nations. And so you had Wa'il Ghunaim. Wa'il Ghunaim was the Twitter boy. Everybody was talking about on Fox and CNN and how this is a secular revolution in Egypt. What happened on Victory Day? He was thrown out of the stage. Who took the stage and spoke on Victory Day in Egypt? It was none other than the spearhead of the Muslim Brotherhood, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi.
So you were talking to me at lunch, and I forgot the word in Arabic, but this idea, the strategy, the
Muruna.
Maruna, the
Yes.
end is the same, the dominance of Sharia law throughout the world, but the strategy is different. Talk about this.
You know, I mean, the question people need to ask themselves, what happened? Has Al-Qaeda, has the Muslim Brotherhood, has the leopard shed its spots all of a sudden? All of a sudden, they're all peaceful. What's going on? What's going on was a plan from 1989, December, in fact, in the US, in which the spirit leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, met with other Muslim Brotherhood in the United States of America, and they decided to begin a movement and a teaching and a new doctrine called Muruna, which means how to be flexible, flexibility in Islam. In fact, I'll read a quote of what Muruna is. Many Americans heard of taqiyya wal kitman, how to defend the faith, how to cover the faith, how to smile in the face of your enemy while you harbor inner animosity towards them. In other words, put a different face. And this is a
terrorist ploy.
Absolutely.
Blend
And Muruna is part of Islam. And so Qaradawi says, he gives it names, doctrine of balance. This is what doctrine of balance within Muruna states. Look what he says. To balance between good and evil. In other words, Muslims need to do evil. How can they do evil and be forgiven? For evil is a sin. To balance between good and evil, and if they conflict with each other, we make priority as to when we put ahead evil for the sake of good. In other words, you can do evil things, but it's for the sake of good. The way the US looks at things, as they look at the lesser of the two evils, at this moment, they're thinking, okay, what's happened in the Middle East? Tunisia has become a Sharia institution now. It's going to become all Islamized. Libya, Muammar Gaddafi is no more. Things I've said in your program that will happen years ago and already happened. Egypt is turning to Islamic. But the West is thinking, well, which one do we prefer? Iran's fiery brand of Islam or a moderate Islamic government in the Middle East? Turkey being so-called moderate, but they're not moderate at all. All what happened was that the Islamists learned from the experiment of Al-Qaeda. Osama bin Laden is no more. They learned from the experiment of Iran. You see, cyber rattling, nuclear. They said, we need to gain the West first. This is Muruna. You have to be stealth to gain the power, to topple all the governments throughout the Middle East. Then we can proclaim a caliphate. The proclamation of an Islamic caliphate is part of the system. Israel is in great danger. But I'm not worried about Israel. Yes, it's in a great danger, but we keep forgetting about the most important element in the Bible, God. God is in the side of Israel. Iran will gain its nuclear, no question. In fact, I've won this gentle...
Wait, say that again, because that's a big statement. You believe that Iran is going to succeed in developing nuclear weapons and then do what? Launch them against Israel?
They could launch them against Israel, but remember, the Israelis have the Aero missile. It could meet any missile coming from Iran midway over on top of Saudi Arabia. And if you look at the Bible, remember, the harlot is destroyed by two entities, by the people of the hand of my people, Israel. And then you have in Isaiah 21, arise, O Elam, to destroy what? Arabia. Elam is Iran. Persia will destroy Arabia. I believe Arabia is the harlot of Babylon. If you look at the Bible, when you read Babylon in the Bible, all the names of the cities, entities, regions within those Babylon in the Bible, you will never find any ancient name of any Babylonian city. There is no mention of Kalne, Sumer, Akkad, Babel, Erech. Every single vicinity is in Arabia. The burden against Dumma is in Arabia. The burden against the Didan, Qidar, those are all in Arabia. It's born from Babylon. That's why it's called the daughter of Babylon. we need to focus on Saudi Arabia because it is mentioned heavily in the Bible.
Okay, so now we're shifting into Bible prophecy, and I think that the mainstream view for many, many years has been a revived Roman Empire,
Yes.
10-nation confederacy, revived Roman Empire that eventually the Antichrist emerges from. Now, you see something very, very different in Scripture. I really want to encourage you to get the book, by the way. We're offering it on Jewish Voice this week, God's War on Terror, Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible. It all ties together, and as part of our theme this month is 2012, the final year. We'll talk more about this in the weeks ahead. Again, some final thoughts on the final days when we return.
Enemies gather, plans are made, and terror rains down on the innocent. The force that shocked the nation a decade ago is gathering momentum once again. In his detailed book, God's War on Terror, Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible, former PLO terrorist Walid Shoebat reveals the critical links between Islam and the Bible's prophetic timeline for the last days. With it, you'll unlock mysteries in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, and discover how the Islamic end times mindset perfectly matches the spirit of Antichrist. What is the mark of the beast? Why the Antichrist will come from the east, not from the west, and which Muslim nation will lead a coalition to follow the Antichrist. In appreciation for your gift of $50 or more, we want to send you a copy of God's War on Terror. Your gift will ensure that urgently needed medical care will reach hurting Jewish people in some of the most remote and forgotten places on earth, and they will hear the truth of Yeshua, the Messiah. Call now, and we'll include a copy of A Rabbi Looks at the Last Days. Much of what you've heard about the return of the Messiah may not be the whole story. In this stirring book, Jonathan Bernis brings a fresh view and extraordinary insight to this riveting and timely subject. With it, you'll better understand these troubling times and discover the startling link between Israel, the Jewish people, and the return of the Messiah. Call or click right now with your gift of $50 or more to receive your copies of God's War on Terror and A Rabbi Looks at the Last Days. Your generosity will ensure that urgently needed medical care and the truth of Yeshua will free these Jewish people imprisoned by sickness and spiritual oppression. Don't wait. Call or click now. And thank you for your faithful support.
I really encourage you to get Walid's materials. He really has insight into this whole revised, not Roman Empire, but Islamic Empire. And I'm really paying close attention to what the Lord is revealing through Walid. But I've been talking about specific signs that we're in the end times, and at the same time want to make it absolutely clear that no one knows the hour, no one knows the day, and if anyone tells you they know the very day that Jesus is going to return, that the Messiah is going to return, you need to run in the other direction because no one knows. What we do know is the season, and we're encouraged to know the season. And I've been going through some very specific indicators. I talked in past weeks about the rise of deception. There is more deception, more cult and occult activity than we've seen, I believe, certainly in my lifetime and probably in all of biblical history. We need to be rooted in the Word of God. We need to be rooted in prayer, in His presence. We need to hear the voice of the Holy Spirit. We need to have sound doctrine. I can't stress that enough. So number one, the rise of deception, which has clearly been happening. And number two, I talked about nation rising against nation, wars and rumors of wars, terrorism. 9/11 has brought a whole new dimension to this revelation of Yeshua in Matthew 24, where every day we wake up wondering what the threat level is going to be. Our lives have been completely changed since 9/11 with the rise of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, and that's not going to go away. That will continue. Iran is striving to develop a nuclear weapon. We're not sure where that's going to go, but it's a very serious occurrence. This Arab Spring and the rise of these new governments that people think will be democracies, but in fact will bring Sharia law to places like Egypt, which will become much more unstable than before, especially as they relate to Israel, is a very great concern, and I believe that ties into all this. Yeshua says these are only the beginning of sorrows. The time is not yet at an end, but to be concerned about these things. Now, I want to mention just a couple of other things today. First of all, I'd like to look at Matthew 24, verse 8. Yeshua tells that these things, I talked also about the rise of pestilence and famine in verse 7. Let me read that again. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in many places, or diverse places. We're seeing the rise of earthquakes and tornadoes and tsunamis like never before in history. I believe greater or more frequent occurrences than ever before. And he says in verse 8, these are the beginning of sorrows. And then in verse 9, he warns, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my namesake. Now, there's two ways to understand this. I want to talk about both of them. The first way that we interpret this is to go back to the context. Jesus is talking to his disciples. He's speaking about Jerusalem and the Jewish people. And so my understanding, first and foremost, is this tells us that in the very last of the last days, there will be an increase in anti-Semitism. As a matter of fact, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith says that anti-Semitism is at the highest point it's been since World War II. Friends, I'm talking about the highest point since Nazi Germany, where 6 million Jewish people were killed simply because they were Jews, and very few believers, very few Christians did anything about it. I believe we're going to see a rise in anti-Semitism. It's already happening. It's veiled in this anti-Zionism, which is actually anti-Semitism. And you need to be praying. You need to be interceding for the Jewish people. You need to be standing up for Israel. And I want to ask you this question. You claim to love the Jewish people. Are you willing to put your life on the line for us? You may very well have to do that. Iran has already declared, Ahmadinejad has said if they can finish developing this nuclear weapon, which the world seems to be standing by and allowing to happen, he will fire it against Israel. No one's stopping him. Will he actually finish developing this nuclear weapon, and will they fire it against Israel? Only time will tell, but it's very likely that Israel will be forced to take action, and again, we'll see this rise of anti-Semitism. There's already great anti-Israel attitudes in the UN, in Europe, and then sadly it's growing in America as well. As a believer, you need to be taking a stand because the word is very clear that the world will again turn against Israel. But another way we can understand this is he's talking to his disciples. He's talking to believers. He's talking about true Bible believers, you and I. And so as anti-Semitism increases, so does an anti-Christian spirit. And we're seeing that in America. It's growing. It's growing in the media. We're seeing it in so many places. Anti-prayer in the schools, abortion, the propaganda against separation of church and state, which is artificial, means as it goes with Israel and the Jewish people, that same spirit will attack the church. And so we need to be very concerned about praying for the Jewish people, standing with them, interceding on behalf of our nation, and so on. Now, I want to also mention verse 32 in the just few moments that I have left. We're encouraged by the words of Jesus himself. Now, learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and puts forth leaves, know that summer is near. Likewise, when you see these things, know that it is near, even at the door. And then he talks about that generation not passing till all things be fulfilled. And then lastly, I want to draw your attention to verse 37. As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. It was suddenly for many that were not expecting. It will be suddenly for those that claim to be believers. What is the earmark of the time of Noah? It's not just the rise of sin and the rise of things like homosexuality, but it's violence, violence. We're seeing violence increasing in the world. All of these signs tell us that the time of the end is near. What should we be doing? We should be about the Father's business. We should be spending time with him. We should be getting deep into the Word, rooting in the Word so that we can't be deceived. And we should be fulfilling everything the Lord has given us to accomplish before he returns. Again, I want to quote the words of Jesus himself. I must be about the work of him who sent me while it is yet day, for night will come when no man can work. Is 2012 the end? I don't believe that it is, but I believe that we are nearing that time. We're that much closer to the return of Yeshua, to the return of Jesus. The fig tree is Israel. It's blossomed. Jerusalem is back under the Jewish control. Jewish people are coming to faith in record numbers, all declaring that Jesus is getting ready to return. We remain steadfast in pursuing our mandate to reach the Jew first, and all people, wherever they may be in the world. We go to the remotest places to bring them hope and help while there's still time. I want to thank you. You helped us to bring medical aid, eye care, dental care to more than 29,000 hurting people in 2011, and we've been challenged to do more in 2012. Last year, over 4,000 people, many of them Jewish, came to know Jesus, Yeshua, as their Messiah. We believe for more in 2012. God always blesses these wonderful people, and we're very grateful for the opportunity. We have more outreaches planned for 2012 than we've ever undertaken before, and we'll need you to continue to join with us to ensure that we reach as many hurting Jewish people as possible. Now, with your gift of $50 or more, which will help us provide urgently needed medical treatment to thousands in the remotest regions of the world, and more importantly, that your gift will help us to bring the love of Yeshua, Jesus, and literally transform thousands of lives. With your $50 gift, we want to send you a few wonderful gifts and to sow into your life. First of all, Walid's book, God's War on Terror, Islam, Prophecy, and the Bible, and my book, which is a bit simpler, Rabbi Looks at the Last Days, so that you'll understand the times that we live in. And we want to get these out to you right away as our way of saying thank you and sowing into your life as you help us to sow into the lives of thousands of needy Jewish people. So I want to thank you for your prayers and faithful financial support. Well, that's all the time we have for another program. I want to thank you so much for being with us today, and be sure to join us again next week. Until then, I want to remind you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. The Bible promises they shall prosper that love thee. For all of us at Jewish Voice, this is Jonathan Bernis saying shalom, and God bless you.
Jewish Voice is made possible by the support of friends and partners like you.